Welcome back to another video on Python. So as part of the introduction to Python, we've already talked about how to use the shell, how to write a program, save it as a script, run the script, how to set up the variables. And we've even used some of the built-in functions such as print and input. What we're doing here, I just wanted to make sure we had exposure to additional built-in functions that are available. Not that we have to know everything, because that data is available on help, and anytime you want to know, you can go to the help and figure out what the functions are and how to use them. Having said that, let's go and jump into Python.org, which are the keepers of Python. They basically are the one where they are the resource for Python and keep everything there. They have a library, for example, in docs.python.org/3library function, or you could just simply say Python functions on Google. And I haven't done this, so this is a bit risky doing it on the fly. But if you say Python functions, built-in functions, you probably get a list as well. So okay, so that basically takes you to the same spot. So if you go there, they have the built-in function listed. And for example, in the homework, you need to use a few of them. I think you need to use the bin. You have to use the hex functionality, and then ORD as well, ORD function. And then length is a useful one as well to have. So there are many, and of course, we have used input and print, if I can find them. Input right here, we've used it in the past. You can read the full description if you want. And of course, we've been using print all the time. So let's go back and take a look at some of that. For example, let's click on length. And the length is pretty straightforward. It says if you give me a string, if you so let's say x, let's come up with a string called string text, and put a string. Have a nice day. Okay, so that's a string. I'm putting it in here. I want to know how many characters that, for example, and all I can say is I can say length, and then I can say text, and boom, it has it. And notice, as I was doing it, it was giving me guides about how to use it. Okay. Now, another function, we don't need to, we can go there and look at it to figure out what it is, but another function you need for one of the homework problems in the end of the chapter is you got to use ORD. And so ORD, basically, you give it a character that says you got to give it a single character. So I'll give it a character, let's say H. What it does, it returns the Unicode for H, okay? So if I hit return, 72 comes back. And then what you could do, so let me do, let's do this and put it in, let's say, X. We'll put it in X. And or, remember we were talking about ASCII? This is Unicode. It gives you the kind of the 16-bit version of it. But there's an ASCII as well, but we're gonna do the homework, you need to use this. So if I use a ORD, X is equal to ORD, and so now 72 is put in there. And then I may want to do something more with it. For example, I may want to display this in a binary. Then there's another function, built-in function called bin. So I can basically say, okay, go bin, make it a binary in X, and it gives me a binary value corresponding to whatever X is. Or I could say, I want it in hexadecimal, and I can say X, give it to me in hexadecimal, and there it gives it to me in hexadecimal. So it's kind of, I mean, it's useful features. Some of the couple of really useful ones that we've used in the past, for example, has been input. And we've used in the past, we've used input to get users' data, right? We've got input, and we've said enter a number, for example. asking for a number to come in. So we can say whatever you want to put into it. The one thing you really got to be careful with is when I say enter number, okay, and I say here is the results. Oops. Here is the results. What in brings back, even if the user inputs numbers, it brings back a string. So for example, enter a number, I say 4. So result is 4, but result is actually a character. So if I were to, for example, want to add something to it, let's say I want to take results and add 2 to it, I'm going to get an error. It says, hey, you're trying to add a number to results. So then what we have these nice conversion features available that we can take anything and convert it to anything else. So if I know that input always brings back string, now the question is how can I turn it into number? And all I have to do is say int results. And what it does, it turns it to integer, okay? So now if I wanted to use it, let's say, I can say x is equal to int results. So what is saved there is no longer a string, but is a number. Now I can say x plus 4. Boom, I got an 8 with no problem. Okay. And then maybe I want to represent that as a float. I could take anything. I can take the result and say x is equal to float. Float is, so if I have decimal, so let's say I have results. Okay, and x comes back, and now it's a float. It's got decimal points. So 4 was kind of a straight number, so that wasn't very exciting. But you can do this kind of stuff, and I can turn it back to a string if I wanted to. For example, I could have an x that is equal to 23, 4, 5, 45 plus 29, and it's actually a floating point number. But maybe I want to concat. If for example, if I want to take a string test and I want to concatenate, attach this to it, and if I say x, it's going to complain. It says you're trying to add a number to a text because x is a float, and you're trying to do the float on a text. But then you say, okay, what do I do? Well, just make it the same. So what you could do in here, you could say, okay, that's fine. You have the text. Yes, I want to concatenate them, but don't worry that it's a number. Just make it look like a text and attach it. So I can do a conversion called string, and I can put x into it. So now x is turned into a string, and life is good. And test is equal to, test to the 35 prints just normally. So those are these conversions are kind of useful to go between different things in case things are not matching and you want to match them. Python is careful about not mixing and matching two different types to cause trouble. So you gotta have, if you're gonna add two things together, they better be of the same type, or you multiply them, or you can do other things to it. Okay. So that's it. So the input we already know how to do. We can run input to get data and do whatever we want to do with it. The other one we've learned to use is another function, another useful function is print. And the print is pretty useful because print we use to print this is a test that we've already done it. And then you can put a comma, put an X in here, whatever number you want in here, or put a comma, put another text in here, next test, and then close the parentheses, hit return, and it prints it. Now, if you can see, maybe I want to do something a little fancier, and there's this feature available here, which is said you can say print, okay, and then you can format it. In other words, instead of having to put commas like that and put the numbers into the print itself and have no control about how much space between those things occur. You could, for example, say this is a test, and what I want my numbers to be. This is a test, and I want to show the number in decimal. If you want to show it in decimal, you say %d, or you can say, no, I want my number to be in hex. So you can say %x, okay? Or maybe you want to show another string, show a string. Okay, that's all good. So all you have to do is put these in double quotes. I forgot to do that. So we do a double quote from here to here. This is called the formatting string. I'm just putting stuff. Anytime I want a decimal number, I do %d. Anytime I want a hex, I want a %x. And anytime I want to show a string, I say %s. And then what I'll do is after the thing, I'll do after the double quotes, I do a %, okay? And after that, I open a parentheses and put the information in. The first D, let's say I show X. And what happens, it takes the X number, whatever was 235, and shows it as a decimal point. And I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out. It might not let me do it because it has, it's a float right now. X is set to 235.29. So we'll see if it rounds it up. Hopefully it rounds it up. That would make more sense to round it up. Then the second number, I'll say I want to print it in hex. So I'm going to do another X. You can do another number if you want. And then maybe the last one, I have a string someplace. I don't know if I have a string anywhere defined. But if not, I'll just throw a new string. It could be a variable, it could be my typing this. So what happens is that this X, the first X corresponds to the first % sign, which is a formatting hint. Then it says print it as a decimal. The second X says put it in hex. And also I could have a %f, which is a float. So represent the number as a float. We'll come back and do that in a minute as well. So if I hit return, oh, I'm missing a parentheses. I didn't close all the parentheses. So if I close it and hit return, okay. So it says, yeah, it doesn't, not a float. %x is not a float. You won't like the float. So let's go fix this. And let's say x is equal to 235. And let's do this again so that we don't run into the float. You can't force a float into a decimal because you lose some information. So as you can see, this is a test. Number in decimal was 235. That's what I put in there. Number in hex is going to be EB. You can go test it, but EB should be 235. And then whatever my new string was that I put in there, then wherever %s was. If you're used to C, this is a bit confusing. It is for me because of C, PHP, and all the other programs I do, they use a comma here. And so, but the idea is the same. And it even has more features if you really want to get into it. For example, if I want to force print, for example, I want to print, and let's say I want to print a floating point number, floating point representation, okay? Present. I can say, okay, that is %f, okay? And then remember what we do is double close the thing, %, and then we put whatever number we want the f to be in here, and mine was an x. So I put it in here, close the thing, and hit return, and it shows up. And then the nice thing is you have control over these things. For example, if you just don't want to, by the way, Alt-P copies the previous command you've typed if you don't want to type it again. So I can say, okay, that's cool that you're doing that, but give me room for 4 whole part and only give me like 3 of the digits. Don't give me 5, 6 digits that it's doing right now. So you can kind of tell him that by putting the number here. This is saying, give me 4 whole non-fraction portion and give me 3 fraction digits. So if I do the same thing and print it, what it does, notice the number of zeros got shrunk. So that's the only difference. Okay. And if you notice, they added a little space in here, so there's room for, because I asked for 4 digits. think that's pretty much it. So we talked about, oh, then we've already talked about that, but there are a lot of nice features available, such as if you want to tab, if you want to do new lines and things like that. Let's say I want to do the same thing. Let's do this time, and let's do it in hex. So X, what is X? X is float, no, X is not float. So we can say, okay, represent this number in a hexadecimal format, but put a couple of tabs between the last character that I have and the number you're going to represent, and maybe put a 0x, because typically they use 0x to represent a hex number designation. And then maybe I want to add a few, see how this floating got crammed in here. Maybe I want to put a few new lines and a tab before I do that. So that goes down a couple of lines and shifts over. These are most formatting to make them look pretty. And I do that, see now the number comes out this way. So we've used these things, but I think this is a good time to kind of see where there are additional commands available, some of the features there, and things of that nature. Okay. That brings us out to the end of the built-in functions. And once again, there are a tremendous number of built-in functions in Python. A sampling is provided here in this document that we went through with some description of them. And then in addition to these, there are people who are putting all kinds of modules. There's a math module, there's a time module, there's a graphic module. There's also this whole infrastructure. If you want to do a graphical user interface, there's a whole bunch of tools available to make that make that push job easy. It's beyond the scope of our conversation here, but those are available. I just wanted to give you a heads up that that type of thing is available if you're interested and want to continue learning and moving forward with Python. Thanks for watching.